In the rugged expanse of the Indian Territory, under a sky vast and unyielding, rode a man whose very name was synonymous with justice and fearlessness. Bass Reeves, a towering figure clad in a weathered coat with eyes sharp and discerning, traversed the landscape that was as untamed as the outlaws he pursued. Born into slavery, Reeves had forged his own path to freedom, escaping to Indian Territory and becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal, the first black man to hold such a position. His reputation was built on a foundation of unrelenting courage and an unwavering moral compass. He was a man who believed in the law, a rare beacon of righteousness in a land where the law was often bent and broken. This territory was a mosaic of cultures and communities, each with its own story, each a thread in the rich tapestry of the West. As night fell, the sky turned a deep indigo, speckled with stars that shone like beacons in the vast wilderness. Reeves, silhouetted against this backdrop, thought he almost sensed rain coming. But not at this time of year, no. Reeves would later learn that it was a storm of a different kind looming just over the horizon. Act 1. Webb's Sinister Deeds. It was a heat wave in the Chickasaw Nation, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty plains. Jim Webb, a foreman known for his brute strength and short temper, ruled over the ranch lands with an iron fist, compelling working teams harder despite the conditions. His reputation for cruelty was well known, especially after an incident involving a hired helper woman named Sarah. Sarah, a resilient soul with kind eyes, had once too often overcooked Webb's meal, and one night he snapped. Webb beat her to an inch of her life, and it took her nearly a year to recover, though because of the limited options to make money, she returned to his service. Webb's most heinous act, however, had just occurred the day before, and word was beginning to spread. The Reverend William Stewart, a black preacher who owned a modest piece of land adjacent to Webb's ranch, had been killed and left for the birds. The Reverend, a man of faith and reason, proposed a fair compromise over a land dispute, hoping to avoid any conflict. Webb, with a deceitful nod, agreed. But as they walked the disputed land, Webb's true nature surfaced. In a shocking act of violence, he turned on the Reverend, murdering him in cold blood. He believed the color of the Reverend's skin was going to protect him from the consequences. That, and one more trick he had up his sleeve. In the shadows, Webb had an influential ally, a powerful rancher and government official named Thomas Clayton. Clayton, with his connections and influence, was determined to keep Webb out of the law's grasp. This alliance was a testament to the corruption that plagued the territories, where justice was often overshadowed by power and prejudice. As night fell over the territory, casting a serene glow on the rugged landscape, Webb sat in his study with Clayton. The room was filled with the aroma of burning wood from the fireplace and the sound of their scheming. "They wouldn't dare come for me," Webb said confidently, swirling a glass of whiskey. Clayton, a man with a cold gaze and calculating mind, replied, "Even if they do, I'll ensure it gets smoothed over, but just lay low for a while now." Webb nodded at this and took a sip of his drink. Act 2. The First Strike of Justice. As dawn broke over the Indian Territory, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Bass Reeves received word of Webb's vile deed. His heart, though hardened by the realities of the West, ached for the injustice meted upon the Reverend. Determined to unearth the truth, Reeves paid a visit to Sarah, the helper woman. She lived in a modest abode, her eyes telling a story of suffering and resilience. With a gentle but firm tone, Reeves asked, "What can you tell me about that night, Sarah?" Trembling, yet bolstered by Reeves's presence, Sarah recounted Webb's brutality and his frequent meetings with Clayton, the government official. This revelation painted a clear picture of the corruption shielding Webb. Next, Reeves, donning his iconic black hat and badge, confronted Clayton. In the face of Reeves's imposing figure, Clayton's facade of confidence wavered. "Marshal Reeves, I assure you, Webb is merely a misunderstood man," Clayton stammered, avoiding Reeves's piercing gaze. Unsatisfied, Reeves sought the support of Judge Isaac Parker, known as the hanging judge, for his stern verdicts. In Parker's chambers, amidst walls lined with law books and the air heavy with the responsibility of justice, Reeves laid out his case. Parker, after listening intently, granted the warrant for Webb's arrest. With the warrant in hand, Reeves set out for Webb's ranch. Disguised as a cowboy, fresh off a cattle drive with his pay to spend, he approached under the guise of seeking shelter and a meal. Webb, unsuspecting of the lawman's true identity, and greedy to swindle away the cowboy's cash, welcomed him in. Later that night, Reeves sat in wait. He had pretended to get very drunk, and Webb would think him to be passed out in bed. If Webb was coming for that money, it would be now. Sure enough, the door opened slowly, and Webb's bulky silhouette stood in the frame. Reeves waited unseen in the corner, gun trained on Webb. As the foreman entered the room, Reeves slammed the door shut behind him and boomed out, "Jim Webb, you are under arrest for the murder of Reverend William Stewart." Act 3. Webb's desperate escape. The morning sun cast long shadows over the jail where Jim Webb was held, its bars casting a grid of light and dark across his sullen face. Webb's confinement was short-lived, as Thomas Clayton wielded his influence like a dark cloak, enveloping the law in shadows. With a hefty sum of money and hushed conversations in the right ears, Webb was released, stepping back into the world with a smirk of triumph. Webb's freedom was a bitter pill for Reeves, but the seasoned lawman knew the outlaw's nature all too well. Men like Webb, Reeves mused to himself, they can't help but reveal their true colors again. Meanwhile, Clayton, in his opulent office, worked tirelessly to manipulate the legal system. He wasn't going to get anywhere with that stick-in-the-mud hanging Judge Parker, but he reached out to Parker's boss, the circuit court chief judge, a man of considerable power but not immune to Clayton's persuasive skills. Yet, hanging Judge Parker stuck to his guns even under pressure from his boss. His alliance with Reeves held firm, and Parker was determined that this was going to trial. Forewarned by Clayton, Webb fled the day before his scheduled court appearance, setting the stage for his ultimate downfall. Reeves, upon hearing this, revisited Sarah. Knowing the stakes, she shared a crucial piece of information. "He packed up supplies like when he goes north. There's a spot he goes away to somewhere near the Red River," she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and hope. With a new warrant and a critical lead, Reeves set out once again, his resolve as unyielding as the land he traversed. Act 4. On the Trail of an Outlaw. As Bass Reeves rode into the vast wilderness of the Chickasaw Nation, the land whispered tales of those who tread its paths, outlaws, lawmen, and those caught in between. The sky above stretched endlessly, a canvas of blue splattered with cotton-white clouds. Reeves's journey took him past a secluded cabin where he found an old man, battered and bruised. "Webb," the man coughed out, his voice as dry as the land, "took my food. Darn near beat me senseless. Asked about the Red River." Reeves's eyes narrowed. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The lawman's haste was interrupted when his faithful horse came down ill. He stopped at a native encampment, where the warmth of their fire and the respect he had earned from the tribes over the years provided refuge. He left his ailing steed in their expert care and was able to borrow a fresh horse for the remainder of his journey, a testament to the mutual respect and trust between Reeves and the native people. Reaching the outpost town near the Red River, Reeves's inquiries about Webb were met with tight lips and wary glances. That told him everything he needed to know. He was close. Later that night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Reeves sat by a campfire, his thoughts on the hunt. The wilderness around him was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, a symphony of the untamed land. Act 5, The Final Showdown. In the deep canyons of the Chickasaw Nation, Jim Webb felt like a cornered predator. He had been traveling for days now, attempting to put distance between him and Reeves, but the lawman would not relent. As Webb chewed his venison, he sat and thought. This canyon was claustrophobic, narrowing with every mile. He was running out of time. Maybe he could use this terrain to his advantage and spring a trap. Yes, it was time to make his stand. Webb let out a wicked grin. After all, a cornered predator is the most dangerous kind. The next day, Webb hid in wait, high in the narrowing canyon, rifle at the ready. Sure enough, Reeves appeared just as Webb had planned. Waiting until the right moment, Webb let his first shot loose. A narrow miss. No matter. He had time for more shots. He was well protected, and Reeves had no escape. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a bullet grazed the stone near him. What the heck, Webb thought. That wasn't Reeves doing the shooting. Then another and a third. Webb was pinned down. You see, Reeves had sensed the trap coming. Years of tracking outlaws had honed his instincts. He wasn't alone. He brought Indian allies. Once Webb had made his position known with that first shot, Reeves' posse began to blanket him with gunfire. Webb's place high on the cliffs was now his undoing. As he tried to climb down to reposition, he was uncovered and slow. He took a bullet to the chest, falling 15 feet and breaking a leg. As Webb lay dying, he offered his revolver to Reeves. "You are a brave man," he conceded, a grudging respect in his eyes. "The only way your plan would work is if you were willing to chance my first shot." Reeves accepted the revolver with a nod. "You almost got me," he said, showing Webb the bullet hole in his hat. As the sun set over the Chickasaw Nation, casting long shadows across the canyon, Bass Reeves stood in contemplation. The air was still, heavy with the echoes of gunfire and the finality of justice served. He looked towards the horizon, where the sky turned shades of crimson and gold, reflecting on the beauty and the struggle of the wild. Reeves was a man who appreciated the wild, but also sought to tame it. In this wilderness, justice wasn't a given. It was carved out by the brave and the steadfast. Men like Reeves, who stood against the tide of lawlessness, shaped the future of the American West that we now take for granted.